They say the deepest betrayal comes not from enemies, but from those closest to you. And when your world is already crumbling, a single push from the ones you trust most can send everything tumbling into darkness. The night the door lock was tampered with, I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. My daughter was already asleep, wrapped in her favorite star-printed blanket, and I was nursing a lukewarm cup of tea, staring blankly at the television. I noticed the scratch marks on the lock by accident, subtle, almost invisible. But as I turned the key, a gut-deep chill surged through me. That lock had been forced. I felt the breath catch in my throat. My fingers trembled slightly as I slid the key out and pushed the door open, stepping inside cautiously. The apartment was dimly lit, quiet, eerily so. Nothing seemed out of place until I noticed the thin drawer beneath the hallway table had been pulled slightly open. I hadn't touched that drawer in days. My heartbeat quickened. I walked silently across the room, listening. Each step echoed against the floor like a warning. I checked the kitchen. The window latch was unhooked. And then, in the soft light of the hall, I saw the living room drawers disturbed, papers spread like someone had been rifling through them in a hurry. My name is Claire. I'm 32 years old, a widow, and a mother to a precious 5-year-old girl named Alara. A few years ago, I lived what many would call a beautiful life. My husband, Marcus, was my anchor, my confidant, my best friend. We weren't rich, but we had enough love to feel like we had the world. His sudden death in a traffic accident ripped my soul from my chest. One phone call, and the life I knew was gone. Grief is a lonely road. People console you, bring casseroles, murmur apologies, then move on. But you stay frozen in time. After Marcus died, I barely had time to grieve. Life doesn't pause for mourning, especially not when you're a mother. And my family? They didn't help me rise. They watched me drown. I had been the silent savior of my family for years. My parents, once proud and upright in public, were drowning in debts behind closed doors. Loans from banks, shady dealings with private lenders, they were always one bad day away from collapse. And I, out of guilt, loyalty, or perhaps desperation for love, had quietly carried their burden. Every month, a significant portion of my income vanished into their bottomless pit. Rent collectors didn't knock on their door because I paid them. Lights stayed on because I made sure the bills were handled. Their car kept running, their lives kept functioning because of me. No thank you. No recognition. Just expectation. And at the heart of this entitlement was my younger sister, Evelyn. Evelyn, the golden child. The center of their universe. Every achievement she made was celebrated like a national holiday. Every failure? Swept under the rug, or worse, blamed on someone else. On me. After Marcus' death, I hoped, just for a moment, that they'd show a sliver of compassion. Maybe they'd offer support, kindness, something. But one night, as I sat at the kitchen table reviewing our bills, my mother strolled in with a glass of wine and a cruel smirk. Evelyn needs a proper place to live, she said, like she was discussing the weather. You should hand over your apartment. It's too big for a widow and a child anyway. I blinked. What? My voice cracked. This apartment is mine. Marcus and I worked for it. We saved, sacrificed, and poured our love into every corner. She didn't flinch. You have no use for it anymore. Evelyn is starting a new chapter in her life. Be a good sister. Make room. And just like that, I was disposable. I refused. Calmly, but firmly. She stared at me, eyes colder than ice. If you won't support this family, then you and Alara will need to find somewhere else to stay. You're not welcome here anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor beside Alara's bed, stroking her hair, and I whispered to myself, this ends now. For years, I had been their crutch. But I had nothing left to give. I had buried my husband, raised my daughter, and held together a crumbling legacy that wasn't even mine to fix. I was exhausted. The next morning, I made a decision. No more money. No more silent sacrifices. No more shielding them from the consequences of their recklessness. For the first time in years, I stopped. The silence that followed wasn't peace, it was the rumble before an earthquake. 3 days later, there was a furious knock on the door. I peeked through the blinds to find a burly man in a gray suit, holding a stack of papers. A debt collector. Not just any debt collector. This man had the air of someone used to getting what he wanted. My mother answered the door, Evelyn at her side, all too confident. "Mrs. Ambrose," the man said flatly. "This is your final notice. The payment is overdue. You have 72 hours to comply or we escalate to legal action." I watched her face pale. She turned to me furious. "Claire, what did you do? Why didn't you pay this month?" I stepped forward, calm but resolute. "Because I'm done." Her mouth opened. Evelyn's brow furrowed. "Done? Done with what?" "Done paying your debts," I said. "For years, I covered for you. I took care of everything while you treated me like a servant. You think I owe you?" "No. You owe me." Evelyn laughed, sharp and bitter. "Don't be dramatic. We thought you wanted to help." I looked between them and felt something I hadn't in years. Clarity. "You've mistaken my silence for weakness." That night, I braced myself for fallout. I didn't yet know how deep the lies ran. I didn't yet understand the full extent of their betrayal. But I knew one thing. They had pushed me too far. And I was no longer afraid to push back. The days that followed felt like standing beneath storm clouds, waiting for the first crack of thunder. I knew they wouldn't take my refusal lying down, but I wasn't prepared for how quickly their house of cards would collapse. It started with the phone calls. Not to me, no. Those had always been endless. These were different. These were to my mother. Each ring turned her paler. She'd slam the receiver down only to have it ring again minutes later. I watched silently as she argued in hushed tones, pacing the living room like a caged lioness. "Claire," she snapped one afternoon. "They're threatening to seize the car. Evelyn needs it to get to work." I didn't even look up from the dish I was washing. "Then maybe Evelyn should pay for it." My mother seethed. "You've always been so ungrateful. We raised you, gave you everything." I turned to face her, dripping sponge in hand. "You gave me guilt, debt, and silence. I gave you money, my home, and my life. Don't talk to me about gratitude." The tension was like static in the air. That night, I double-checked every lock on the doors and windows. Something in my gut told me things were about to get worse. And they did. A week later, I came home from picking Alara up at school to find Evelyn sitting at the kitchen table, her arms crossed, her foot tapping. There was a manila envelope in front of her. "What's this?" I asked. "It's a transfer form," she said, smug. "Mom and I talked to a lawyer. If you sign the apartment over, we can keep it in the family. You can move into the back unit at Mom's place. It's smaller, but it's enough for you and the kid." I didn't move. I didn't blink. "I'm not signing anything." Evelyn stood up sharply. "You're being selfish. This is what Dad would have wanted." I laughed. It was hollow, bitter. Dad's not here. And he certainly wouldn't have wanted me to be bullied out of my own home. Her expression turned venomous. "Fine. Then don't say we didn't warn you." That night, someone slashed my car tires. Not all 4, just 2. Just enough to make a point. To let me know I was being watched, pushed, hunted in my own space. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I didn't want to escalate things. But it was clear now they weren't going to stop. And neither was I. The morning after the tires were slashed, I sat on the floor of my living room, staring at the knife marks along the sidewalls, the rubber torn like someone had wanted to gut more than just the car. My hands trembled as I held my phone. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but who? I had spent years protecting a family that was now actively turning against me. And then, as if the universe decided to mock me further, a letter arrived. Not just any letter. It was from a law firm. I opened it slowly, afraid of what I'd find, and there it was in cold legal print. I was being summoned to court. My name was listed as a guarantor for a loan I never signed. The amount was staggering, nearly 6 figures. And the lender? A private financial company I had never even heard of. My hands went cold. They had done it. They had used my name, forged my signature, wrapped me in their web of lies, and now left me to face the consequences. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I barely spoke to Alara, though I hugged her tighter than ever. Her little arms around my neck reminded me why I had to keep going. That evening, I went back through Marcus's folder, the one I'd caught Evelyn rummaging through weeks ago. I sifted through everything slowly, deliberately. And there it was. A document I hadn't noticed before. A photocopy of my signature. Next to a notarized form. But something was wrong, my signature was misspelled. Just one letter off, but enough to catch my eye. It wasn't mine. It was forged. A chill ran through me. I scanned the rest of the documents. And then I found it, another forged form, this time showing Evelyn as a co-owner of the apartment. Dated just 2 months after Marcus's funeral. The betrayal was layered like rot in an old house. I scanned everything, took high-resolution photos, and saved backups to a cloud drive. I also printed extra copies and hid them in 3 separate places. If this was going to escalate, I needed ammunition. The next court hearing came faster than I was prepared for. I walked into the small, sterile courtroom dressed simply but firmly, clutching my file of evidence like it was armor. My mother and Evelyn sat across the aisle. Neither of them looked at me. The judge asked us each to present our side. Evelyn claimed it was a misunderstanding, that I had offered to help, and that we were like any close-knit family. I stood. Calm. Clear. I have never signed a loan agreement with this company, I said, placing the forged signature beside my real one. And this, I held up the co-ownership document, was forged and submitted without my knowledge. The judge leaned forward. This is serious, he said. We will need to verify these claims. Then Evelyn made a mistake. She stood up and spoke out of turn, her voice rising. You think you're so clever, Claire. But we took care of you. You were grieving and couldn't make decisions. We had to step in. There it was. The admission. The judge's pen froze mid-stroke. He turned to the clerk. That will be noted. I didn't speak again. I didn't have to. That day, the court ordered a handwriting analyst to verify the signatures. My lawyer, assigned through a legal aid program, was quiet, efficient, and deadly. He assured me we had more than enough to press criminal charges if necessary. I left the courtroom to find my car's rear window had been smashed. A single word spray-painted across the trunk, traitor. It was war now. But what they didn't know is that I had one more card to play. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of court dates, paperwork, and emotional landmines. The handwriting analyst confirmed what I already knew, my signature had been forged. Not once. Not twice. But 5 times. On loans. Property transfers. Legal waivers. Each one was a needle driven deeper into my trust. The courtroom felt colder each time we entered. My mother refused to look at me. Evelyn wore her guilt like a mask, silent, but simmering beneath the surface. Their lawyer grew paler with every new document we submitted. The judge finally spoke the words I had been praying to hear. Claire Ambrose is hereby removed from any financial liability connected to the loans filed under false pretenses. A formal investigation into fraudulent activity is now in motion. That should have been the end. But it wasn't. One night, I was woken by Alara's soft cries. I rushed to her room and found her clutching her stuffed unicorn, pointing toward the window. Mommy, there was someone outside. I saw them. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed my phone, turned on every light, and stepped onto the balcony. The night was quiet. Still. But at the edge of the garden, I saw footprints, fresh, deliberate. Someone had been there. I reported the break-in attempt to the police, who advised installing a camera. I did better. I installed 3. And a week later, those cameras caught Evelyn sneaking onto the property. She wasn't just desperate. She was hunting for something. But she didn't know I had already moved the documents. What she took from my drawer that night was a decoy. A file filled with fabricated numbers and mocked-up insurance claims. It was bait. The next morning, she confronted me in the parking lot. You think you're clever? She spat. You think you can turn everyone against us? I didn't flinch. I don't have to turn anyone. You're doing that all on your own. The smirk faded. You'll regret this, Claire. You're not the only one with secrets. I leaned in close. Then I suggest you start telling them to the police. They've already got you on camera. Her eyes widened. Panic flickered across her face before she turned and stormed off. That same afternoon, a call came from the prosecutor's office. "Miss Ambrose, we've concluded our investigation. We're pursuing charges of fraud, identity theft, and perjury. A warrant is being issued." I didn't celebrate. I sat on the kitchen floor, holding Alara close, feeling nothing but relief. Not joy. Not victory. Just peace, fragile and unfamiliar. The fallout was swift. The police arrived at my parents' home 2 days later. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as Evelyn was led away in cuffs. My mother collapsed on the porch, wailing. It was a spectacle they couldn't silence this time. I was granted full legal immunity. The forged documents were expunged. My apartment was declared solely mine. The judge even issued a restraining order against Evelyn and my mother, effective immediately. But the most unexpected turn came not from the courtroom, but from a letter. Handwritten. Old paper. My name on the envelope in Marcus's handwriting. It had been tucked away in a safety deposit box, uncovered during the legal scouring of the apartment records. Inside was a note. "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't protect you the way I promised. But I've left something behind, a piece of me, to help you rebuild. You were always stronger than you knew. I believe in you. Now it's your turn to believe in yourself." Beneath the note was another insurance policy, and the deed to a small plot of land outside the city, untouched, undeveloped, and now entirely mine. Marcus hadn't just believed in me. He had planned for a future I never thought I'd have. It had taken years, but the final pieces of their control shattered in silence. After the court battles, the restraining orders, and the arrests, my days began to slow. I no longer jumped at every knock on the door. I no longer checked my phone expecting threats or accusations. The stillness was foreign, like stepping into a dream too soft to trust. But it was real. Alara and I moved into a new space, a sun-drenched apartment that overlooked a quiet park. The old place, our war zone, was sold. The money, combined with the insurance policy and Marcus's secret land, became the seed of something new. I stood on that empty plot of land one morning, the wind catching my hair, the sound of birds breaking the silence, and I felt something I hadn't in years: possibility. I hired a builder. I started drawing plans. Not just for a house, but for a life. A real one. Not one stitched together from guilt and sacrifice, but built on purpose. I launched a small online design studio, working from home while Alara started at her new school. My first clients came from referrals, and soon I had more work than I could handle alone. I hired help. I expanded. I began to breathe. My mother sent letters, each one more desperate than the last. Pleas for forgiveness. Explanations. Justifications. I read them all, then burned them one by one in the backyard fire pit, watching the ashes scatter into the wind like ghosts I no longer feared. Evelyn wrote too, from prison. Her tone shifted from arrogant to apologetic to manipulative in cycles. I never replied. Her sentence was reduced with a plea deal, but she would never regain her influence over me. The silence between us was louder than any argument could have been. And it was mine. I owned it. One crisp autumn evening, I sat on the porch of the nearly finished house with Alara curled beside me under a blanket. The trees were a riot of gold and crimson. The sun dipped behind the hills, and everything was drenched in amber light. She looked up at me and whispered, "Are we safe now?" I hugged her close. "We are. We're finally free." Later that night, I walked through the empty rooms of our soon-to-be home. Each wall a blank canvas. Each floorboard a declaration. I survived. In the master bedroom, I placed the old letter from Marcus in a glass frame. Not as a shrine to grief, but as a monument to strength. They tried to take everything from me. My home, my dignity, my future. But they failed. And in the end, I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to scream or fight. All I needed was to rise. Quietly. Powerfully. Unshakably. Because the sweetest form of revenge is not in their destruction. It's in my peace. It's in the life they never thought I could build. And it's just the beginning.